Guys, we have the GOAT talk all the time. We have the pound for pound talk all the time. Max Holloway came out and he was talking about who is the most exciting fighter of all time. Not the greatest. Who is the most exciting? A question I have never been asked. A question I've never spent a second pondering. And I suspect you guys haven't as well. I'd love to get your take on this, but don't just give me a name. You got to and why. And why is important. So, all right, I want to play along. I want to play along with Max. Who is the most exciting fighter of today? Who is the most exciting fighter ever? Just like the GOAT talk, how are you going to define it? I mean, how are we going to define, right? Because there's some entertainers. Like if you were to take Adesanya, who Max said is the most exciting fighter. Max said it's Adesanya. But if you were to take Adesanya, you're going to get three pieces of entertainment. The walk to the ring is going to be fun. The performance is going to be fun. And his walk out of the ring, complete with post-fight speed, he's going to hit them all out of the park. So if you're giving equal weight, right, to I sit down on my couch, I push a buy button, and who gives me the most value for my money, is if that's what we're deciding entertainment as, or excitement entertaining. Maybe I'm conflicting it, but if that's how we're defining it, I think that Max got it, right? Nobody else entertains on the way to the ring, in the ring, and on the way out. He's the only guy. Bellator's got a guy named MVP. MVP and Adesanya are the only guys that every second that red light is flashing on the camera, they are performing. Hard to compete with those two. It's very hard. Conor McGregor has a commodity that is beyond the punches and the kicks. So Conor, if that's how it gets thrown in there, and if we're looking at just in-ring action, just once the referee says go to the referee says stop, I'll tell you who was exciting for me. Guys, remember 19-year-old Vitor Belfort? Vitor Belfort busted on the scene, and it had a large part to do with when he busted on, because he was a black belt in jiu-jitsu. In fact, he wasn't under the name of Belfort at that time. He was fighting as Vitor Gracie. And then they started calling him Vitor Belfort Gracie. And then eventually he dropped the Gracie, but he was largely representing that family. And I bring that to you because, what's that going to tell you? Knowing nothing and judging a book by his cover and looking at his resume. Oh, his last name's Gracie. Oh, he wants to take this to the ground. And Vitor was knocking people out on his feet, lightning fast. And he was the one that introduced the March step. The March step is quite literally, right? When you're out boxing or even in wrestling or even MMA, one leg leads and one leg doesn't. And you will learn that on day one, and that will be your career for the next 20 years. You will never, if you're a southpaw and you right leg leads, there is never a time in the sport where your left leg would lead. You will learn that on day one. The coach will tell you that, yeah, that will never change. And Vitor invented the March step, where he would start with a cross instead of a jab, and then he would change feet. So now his jab hand just became the cross, and he'd hit you with that while changing feet. So now again, there's no jab hand. He would only hit you with crosses, even though he was hitting you with both hands. It had never been done before. It's called the March step. He created it. He introduced it. He's one of them for me, the most exciting guy ever. I would have Vitor on that list somewhere. And then you started to get the weird ones, the guys that were out there doing weird techniques that you had never seen before. BJ Penn would be on the cusp of that. BJ Penn would be on the cusp of using this weird, unorthodox flexibility. Max, in all fairness, just because of his volume and output and willingness to go two different weight classes against anybody. I mean, Max is on my list somewhere. I imagine he was being a little bit humble and didn't want to include himself on his own list, but it's a very interesting question. Not just for today, but of all time. We have been falsely told over time that people want to see two guys stand and bang. We have been told that. But the greatest selling fighters of all time, started with the greatest sell, Georges St-Pierre, that's not what he did. So we were all told that this is what you have to do, but that's not what the leader did. Or if you even want to bring Brock Lesnar in, and I understand why Brock is different, but if you want to bring Ronda Rousey in, whose numbers were greatly embellished, but still very good, none of those three stood and banged. But we were told And we're still told that to this day. You guys say it as the fans and the consumer and the buyer. I want to see two guys stand and bang. But the top 3 draws ever didn't do that. I only bring to you, there's a different dialogue, there's a different narrative, there's different things to look at with an MMA. You don't have to do the dum-dum approach of two guys that are just throwing lefts and right hands at each other, right? It takes no skill to watch or to understand boxing, a sport that I love. I'm not insulting boxing right now. That takes no skill. There's 2 hands and there's only 4 punches that are legal. You got a jab, a cross, a hook, and an uppercut. There's no other move in boxing. You can understand it very simply. And it would be very interesting. And by the way, if we're on the topic of BJ Penn, let's talk a little BJ Penn. I will tell you, this guy that is going around the internet that we have seen as of late of BJ, that's not the guy I know. I'll tell you straight up, the BJ Penn that I know is one of the nicest guys in MMA. And whatever's going on, I'll steal a word from Dana. But it's the right word. BJ Penn was in the UFC. He was on a real losing streak. I want to say he had lost 7 in a row. And he went from the champion and a main eventer to he's jerking the curtain, but he's still involved. And he was pretty open to say, just keep me involved. Getting a little off course here, but this keeps me straight. Keep me involved. Dana said, all right, you got it. So the last time that we saw BJ, he got heel hooked, tapped out by Ryan Hall. And then this video emerges. And it's BJ in a street fight with just some local guy, and the guy knocks him out. And there was like a press conference the next day. Some card was coming up, but Dana's in front of the media, and of course that question gets asked. What are you going to do with BJ? Did you see this, and what do you think? And Dana simply used one word, but it's the right word. Dana said the video that I saw was sad. And even in wake of what is going on with BJ right now in this new video that's going around, and it was a DUI, and that's not the first one, and then there was obscenities, and there was slurs in there. Sad is the right word. But I will share with you on a different note, that's not the guy I know. I have never met a drunk BJ Penn. I've never met an aggressive BJ Penn. I've never met a rude BJ Penn. I've met a very nice guy, not only to me, but to others. I have never seen any of this. And it sounds as though that the reports are true, that there's outside influences, largely alcohol, outside influences that are changing the BJ that I'm telling you I know. So he's going to be knee deep in red tape. However that goes, whatever those consequences are. If there's any room for you to reserve judgment, he sobers up, quits drinking, and give him another chance. I wish you would keep that open. I've known him from back when. I knew him from before he was the champion. I can tell you from the time he wasn't the champion to he was the champion, he's always been steady, nice, treated people well. Not giving him a pass. I get it. He's knee deep in some red tape. He's going to have to deal with it. It's sad.